There are unclean spirits in our lives and in our land. And I just came here today to tell you, the unclean spirits must go. There are unclean spirits like racism and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia and all manner of evil that human beings perpetuate against one another. Greed, materialism. These are the things that are the unclean spirits in our lives today. Unclean spirits must go. And an unclean spirit can only dwell where there is a hospitable host. Make sure that you take every step to be sure that you are not a hospitable host for an unclean spirit in your life. What are those things? What are those prejudices? What are those areas of your life where you allow bigotry and hatred to dwell? That's an unclean spirit, and unclean spirits must go. Unclean spirits don't come out unless they're called out. They have to be named by name, and you have to recognize and acknowledge that they are there, not only in yourself, but in the world, in our country. We have to acknowledge that these unclean spirits are there. And when we call them out and identify them, recognize them, and acknowledge that they're real, that they're not some fantasy, that they're not some fake news that somebody has created, but that there are in fact realities in our life like systemic racism that exists in our nation and has existed, like white supremacy that has existed in our nation for years. It's an unclean spirit that must be called out, because once it is called out, then it can be eradicated. Unclean spirits don't come out without grieving, though. People become satisfied and comfortable with the unclean spirits that dwell in their lives and in their environment and that dwell in this country. And so they're not going to come out without grieving. What you saw on January 6th was America grieving the casting out of unclean spirits, the identification of some of the unclean spirits that live in our nation, those spirits of racism, those spirits of hatred, those spirits of xenophobia that must be cast out if we're going to be able to live the lives that God is calling us to live and to fulfill the mandates on our lives that God has placed on our lives, and to really reach the potential, the God-given potential that God has for us and for our nation. Last thing I want to suggest to you is unspirits don't come out without convulsion. Now, some of us will say, you know, we've had so much going on in the midst of this pandemic. We've had social and political upheaval. We've had all kinds of hatred and bigotry. That's called convulsion. Those are convulsions happening in our nation because these unclean spirits are being cast out. We're going to move from a place where this nation has been for a long time, many will say 400 years, a place where white supremacy has caused one group to believe that they are greater than another, that they are that they are supreme over another, and that their privilege has disprivileged other groups. And now, today, we are in an age when all of that is being called out. All of that is being clearly stated publicly, even by people who have benefited from the privilege. And so because of that, that's convulsing the nation. That's convulsing the people who've benefited. But unclean spirits don't come out without convulsion. Convulsions have to happen in our nation. And once all of that happens, just like when Jesus healed the man who was possessed of unclean spirits in the synagogue in Capernaum, his very first act of ministry, just like when Jesus healed that man, once the unclean spirits come out, then the last state of the person is so much better than they have ever been before. The last state of this land will be better than it's been before once the unclean spirits have come out, because unclean spirits must go. Be blessed.